Can socialism be destroyed? Socialism pervades our social structures far more than most of us realize. If socialism is defined in its broadest sense as state-provided subsidies, socialism penetrates every area of the state does. Indeed, socialism is nothing more than the activity of the state. This essay is not about the prevalence about socialism, however. This essay discusses its eradication. This essay demonstrates what it takes to eliminate it. The justification for doing so is the greater economic efficiency that comes with the elimination of the state. We need to correct a common misunderstanding to allow the discussion to proceed without confusion. Socialism is usually contrasted with capitalism or private ownership, but there is nothing owned by private interests alone. All forms of ownership are contingent on the existence of the state. No private party has the power to enforce an ownership claim if a mob objects. What we are debating here is, can something replace socialism when socialism is another word for state involvement? In short, when we talk about eliminating socialism, implicit in this is a discussion about the elimination of the state. Leaving the alternative to the end of the discussion, we can note that personal ownership is not socialist as it is universally accepted and predates the state. Personal ownership does not have to deal with the issue of defending competing claims, because personal ownership is only contested by thieves. Personal ownership can then be considered a universal right. People are entitled to what they need to survive, relative to the number of persons considered and the resources available. Thus, in a lifeboat situation, the scarce resources are equally shared. This sharing of resources is only disputed by the most callous of persons. Personal ownership is not transformed into private ownership by renaming it capital. Capital is private property that others can and do lay claim to. Private property always represents a liability. Private property is always exposed to risk of loss because there is always the possibility of someone making a competing claim against it. We have no absolute right to do business. The problem that was created 6,000 years ago and never resolved is how to separate personal from public-owned assets. Because this issue was never resolved, private ownership is fought over by those who say it is akin to personal ownership and those who say it is under the public domain. Governments will expropriate commercial property when needed, and the public get upset with business people for denying we all have a vested interest in how a business is operated. This phenomenon, of a local population rising up against the supposed right of private owners to operate their assets as they see fit, is seen more and more as people contest the right of private organizations to act as if they are sovereign entitles, answerable to no one, least of all the people. But it is also obvious that the common man lacks the machinery required to have an impact in the political sphere. Many business owners think they have the same authority over their property that had been reserved for kings. The crucial argument here is that we are entitled to what we produce. If you create a unique design, you own the design by virtue of your originating it. The books you write, you own. When a farmer plants his fields or an investor builds a factory, it is natural for him to think he owns these things. But the situation is not the same. Books and designs are information. I created the information in this essay. It is true that the farmer planted and reaped, but he planted in soil that has existed thousands of years, and planted seeds that were not produced by him. The farmer contributed labor, but he did not create those things that are part of the natural world. The farmer does not do the work that makes these crops grow. We have to observe what we do and what we take credit for that we did not do. The natural world and natural events pose a serious problem for the philosopher seeking to clarify who owns what. The worker is worthy of his wages, but who pays the farmer if he cannot sell and keep the income from what he has produced? This is the dilemma socialism cannot solve and so discards. The dilemma of economic justice is a paradox the world has never solved. Society either exploits the individual for its benefit, or society is expected to serve the individual without the individual needing to compensate the group for its work or contributions. Many modern societies even expect people to work without compensation, to make the system function, as in volunteer work. The end of socialism means the end of exploitation and injustice. It means the end of people not being paid for what they do, and the end of people being paid for things they did not do. Socialists are not people wanting to do the wrong thing, it is good people trying to do the right thing but incapable of doing so, because the system does not permit it. But to fight the socialist system is to remove the ability to externalize costs onto society and future generations. This requires the removal of power from those who did not work for it and therefore did not earn it and have to right to it. The solution to socialism is subsidiarism. Socialism is a political and economic theory which advocates for the means of production, distribution, and exchange be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. But this description is either a cooperative which operates by direct democracy, or a representative democracy in which the real power remains in the hands of governments. But what is not mentioned, and which is important, is that socialism means power must be abrogated by the rightful owners of power. The doctrine of subsidiarity is a theory which says power belongs in the hands of the one who created it. The convention interpretation of this doctrine is that decision-making authority is best placed, a. where responsibility for outcomes will occur, and b. in the closest appropriate proximity to where the actions will be taken that will produce the outcomes. Decision-making requires power, and power belongs where created, in effect in the hands of those who produce the assets on which power is founded. Power cannot be abrogated or rescinded because the creator position cannot be changed. When we create value, we automatically create power. Along with power comes the right to administrate it. If a person works, that person has a right to be paid. This is a recognition of the power created and a way to disassociate it from the thing created without transferring the power that was created along with it. But justice also demands those who do not work have no claim on the wealth produced by others. Those who produce no power have no right to power. That is the real and fundamental meaning of the doctrine of subsidiarity. If we work, we have a right to the power that flows from the work we do, and no one has a right to expropriate this power, whether for themselves or to benefit a third party. This is the analytical destruction of socialism, and along with it, capitalism and communism. Socialism is antithetical to any system based on moral or righteous power. No one has a right to any power they did not create. In short, the world needs a system that protects the rights of those who create the wealth. To them belong the power. Dominion is Scripture's way of recognizing that to the builder belongs the authority. Power belongs to those who have the ability to pay the costs of what they want and do. This is the power of the Creator. The power of truth is that it leaves power in the hands of those who do the work. Works that leave power in the hands of the builder builds the church. Subsidiarity is not just the lower levels maintaining authority, it is the principle that those who produce the wealth control its disposition. Economic justice means those who do the work benefit. This is the centerpiece and essence of the subsidiarity union, a union of those with power. Socialism is intrinsically about the imposition of costs onto workers, for those who labors are the only people who can have costs imposed on them. We are the only ones who produce value. We are also the only ones with a right to power. Subsidiarians believe the means of production ought to be wholly owned by those who work the machines. Labor creates equity through work, and this produces power.